Hello guys, welcome to the Parson series, and you people told me and arranged for me. Thank you so much, and thank you for your amazing response and awesome response on the Parson series. The good thing is that whenever I try to do something for helping you and something which is new and nobody wants to do it, maybe because it is very hectic, and I somehow take out the time because I have that affinity, that much I want to help you, that I somehow take out the time for that. You people also respond amazingly, and that is the most awesome part of it. So we have already done with the chapter 1, but because you people are reading with the 23rd edition, so I have managed with the 23rd edition now. So the chapter 2 will be continuing from the 23rd edition itself, right? So let's get started. Chapter number 2 is your physiology of the eye. So you have already looked at the anatomy and embryology part. Now we'll be looking at physiology of the eye. Now let's look at the chapter outline. So we will be doing with the blood retinal barrier, nature and formation of the intraocular fluid, the circulation of the aqueous humor, the intraocular pressure, as well as the metabolism of the ocular tissue. So I think this is all very important, and this will also give you an insight to the physiology of the eye. Whatever little physiology that you read when you were reading your physiology in the first year, we'll try to also assimilate that part. Okay, now see this, what they are trying to say. They are saying that human eye is a precise system which comprises of the components that must be optimally maintained so that a clear image is seen. So this is very important, and as I always say in the classes also, that eyeball is a very unique organ. Like, we have got 5 senses, and every sense organ is important in that way. The anatomy faculty will say that whole of the eye, not only whole of the eye, whole of the body is important. Now obviously, okay, no doubt about it, but I think that eyeball is something that is very special, because it is giving you vision. That is the most beautiful aspect of your life, and plus it is one organ that is giving you the physical motility also, as well as your binocular single vision. So motility, that is your physical part, as well as your vision, that is the physiological part, both are there. So it is very important that whole of the system which is present in the eye is very precise. Only then you can see a clear image, right? Transparency, the surface regularity and smoothness, and a stable ocular anatomy are the important things for the sight. So therefore, it is always desired, if you want to see and have the better vision or the best of the vision, you require the transparency, the surface irregularity, the smoothness, that is the refractive surface should be smooth, as well as the stable anatomy. The stable shape of the eye, why actually we have the stable shape of the eye? It is due to the structure of the sclera and also the intraocular pressure higher than the atmospheric pressure. Now normally that the eyeball is not solid. We have got the fluids inside it. We have got what you called as the fluids inside it, and that is why we say that it is having the cystic consistency. Cyst means a fluid filled cavity. So normally we say that eyeball is having cystic consistency. It is a fluid containing cavity, and what is the reason behind maintaining a stable structure? So there are 2 things responsible for it, as we have discussed in your chapter number 1 also, that there are 3 coats of the eyeball. So we have a fibrous coat, a vascular coat, and a nervous coat. So obviously what is required here is the fibrous coat. Fibrous means the strength, the tensile strength. So it is actually the outermost coat which is responsible for maintaining the structure of the eye. Now outermost coat may you have got both cornea and sclera, so obviously it is the sclera only, because sclera is opaque and it contains the collagen stroma, which is responsible for maintaining the integrity of the eyeball. If I talk about the cornea, then obviously it is only partly responsible, because cornea is a transparent structure, and that is why its importance lies mostly in giving you refraction and to a lesser extent for the integrity. Now the second important thing is that you have an intraocular pressure. The fluids which are present inside the eyeball are actually responsible for maintaining some pressure, that is called as intraocular pressure. And do you remember the normal range? 11 to 21 mm of mercury. So that is your 11 to 21 mm of mercury, and actually it is this pressure which is higher than the atmospheric pressure. That is why it is responsible for maintaining the integrity. Now let's see and come to the anterior segment of the eye. Anterior segment, you know that the structures of the eye which are present anterior to the lens. So it is between the cornea and the lens, and the anterior and posterior chamber. Now if you look at the anterior segment, you have got two chambers, anterior chamber and posterior chamber. So both anterior chamber as well as posterior chamber are actually filled with the aqueous humor, and if you look at the composition of this aqueous humor, then it is very similar to the blood plasma. So again, a very important MCQ, that the composition of the aqueous humor is similar to what? It is similar to the maternal plasma, the blood plasma, and with two main functions. Now this aqueous humor has got two main functions. The first important thing is to supply the nutrients to the avascular structures, that is your lens and cornea. Now this is very important. Every time we study cornea, every time we study lens, the first line, how do I start? I start with this, that it is transparent but the nutrition is provided with the aqueous humor. So this is a very important function of the aqueous humor, that it is providing the nutrition to those structures which are avascular, and second important thing is maintaining the intraocular pressure within the normal range. So basically it is the aqueous humor which is responsible for maintaining the intraocular pressure within the normal limit. Also it is responsible for giving the nutrition to the aqueous those structures which are actually transparent and avascular, that is your cornea and the lens. So very important, I must say these two things are quite important. Then we come to the posterior segment. Now if you look in the posterior segment, the space between the lens and the retina. So if I draw the eyeball, it is something like this, right? And this is your lens. So we already know that this lens is the dividing part. So the things which are present here, this will form your anterior segment, yes, and the area which is present here, this will form the posterior segment. So I can say that posteriorly what I have, what is the innermost layer? Innermost layer was your retina. So obviously the space between lens and retina. So only, way of representation is quite different here, but otherwise thing is same. So what they are saying, that in the space that is lying between the lens and the retina, what is there? We have the vitreous humor, because this cavity is also called as the vitreous cavity. This cavity is also called as vitreous cavity, and the fluid which is present here is called as the vitreous humor. It is also called as the vitreous gel, or it is simply the vitreous. Now this vitreous is also transparent gel formed by a network of collagen 2 fibers with the glycosaminoglycan hyaluronic acid. Now wait a minute, do you remember how do we study the structure of the vitreous? I do tell you that the vitreous structure is actually gel-like because it contains the collagen fibers. And what type of collagen? The type 2C. Similar is the statement which is given here, and that is why I say that I do incorporate the important things from the Parsons also. See, they are saying that it is transparent. We have already read this, and it contains the collagen, and that is type 2. And what it was containing? It was containing the crystals of hyaluronic acid. So see, it is given, it contains the glycosaminoglycan hyaluronic acid. So that is present here. That is why whatever are the things which are related to the vitreous, they are called as hyaluronic. Like we have the hyaloid artery, we have got hyaloid membranes, anterior hyaloid membrane, posterior hyaloid membrane, and likewise it also contains few cells. So it contains only few cells, and mostly what kind of cells we have? We have got the phagocytes to clear the debris, and we also have the hyelocytes. Hyelocytes are present on the surface of the vitreous. We have got no blood vessels, and 98 to 99% of its volume is water. Now this is questionable. Vitreous actually does not contain that high amount of water, and it is actually the aqueous humor that contains 99.99% of water. So usually we say that now I don't want to put a cross on Parsons, but yes, definitely it is question mark. It contains about 80% of the water in its content. Okay. Now coming to the blood-retinal barrier, and I think this is a very important concept to understand the diseases of retina, to understand the angiography that we are doing. So very important. Now what is happening? If you look in the eye, we have got semi-permeable membranes. These semi-permeable membranes separates the blood from the ocular cavity, and therefore it is called as blood-ocular barrier. So we have a barrier between the blood and the ocular cavity, so that everything is not going freely into the blood, and they are actually separated with the help of a membrane. This is called as a semi-permeable membrane, the composition of which is shown in figure 2.1. So I'll come to this figure also, okay? We'll come back to this figure. Now the blood ocular barrier is formed in the posterior segment. So basically this blood ocular barrier, it is present in the posterior segment of the globe, and it is made up by three things. So you have to remember this as 1, 2 and 3. So what is 1 here? The walls of the retinal vessels. If you go posteriorly, we have got the walls of the retinal vessels, which like those of the central nervous system are impermeable. So at the one end we have got the cells of the, so if you look at one end, the blood ocular barrier is made by the cells of the retina, and these cells of the retina are just like tight junctions. I should use the word tight junctions because you know these are impermeable. So these tight junctions are actually providing the impermeability to it. If you look at number 2, then it is the Bruch's membrane. What was the Bruch's membrane? Bruch's membrane is nothing but the basal lamina of the choroid. It is the basal lamina of the choroid. And looking at the third thing is your RPE layer, retinal pigment epithelium, and basically it is this RPE layer also which contains the tight junctions. Now in the ciliary region, it is formed by 2 layered ciliary epithelium through which fluid must traverse before the posterior chamber is reached. Now this blood ocular barrier is starting from posterior side and it is also coming to the anterior side. You already know now, see the importance of embryology. We had seen that the outer layer of the optic cup that was forming the pigment epithelium of the retina, that was continuing with the pigment epithelium of the ciliary body and the iris. So see this, it is actually continuing with the 2 layered ciliary epithelium and through which the fluid must traverse before it is reaching to the posterior chamber. In the iris, it is formed by the walls of the iris capillaries which are freely exposed to the anterior chamber through the stroma. So basically this blood ocular barrier is starting from the posterior side, from the cells of the retina, which is continuing to the epithelium of the ciliary body, which contains 2 layers, and then it is continuing to the iris. So basically it is first going to the posterior chamber and finally to the anterior chamber. So if you look at the picture, you have got 3 areas, the A, B and the C area. So first try to see the area number A. So what is this A? A, in this zone, the barrier is formed by the retinal capillaries. That means it is including the retina. We also have the Bruch's membrane, that is your basal lamina of the choroid, as well as the retinal pigment epithelium. So we have seen this. Now look at this area. This is your area number B, which is coming in your ciliary zone. So this is containing, it is consisting of the ectodermal layer formed by the anterior part of the retina, and also prolongation with the two-layered ciliary epithelium. And if you come to the most anterior part, this is your part of the iris. So what is there? In this, the barrier is formed by the uveal capillaries only. The arrow indicates that in A and C, the two-way traffic exists. In the ciliary region, fluid traffic is essentially into the cavity of the eye, determining a circulation through the pupil and out at the angle of anterior chamber. So what they are saying, that if you look at the arrows, in the A and in the B, so here you are having two-way circulation. This is also two-way circulation, but if you look at the C, so this circulation is going something like this. It is going in the posterior chamber, then it is passing through the pupil, then it is going into the anterior chamber, passing through this angle of anterior chamber, and it is traversing out. So nothing, these arrows are showing you the direction of the circulation, how the things are moving in. Okay. Now we come to the capillaries of the retina. So if I concentrate on the capillaries which are present in the retina, they are similar to that of the central nervous system, and these capillaries, similar to the CNS, are impermeable, so that practically no colloid molecules can pass into the cavity of eye. Now this is again very important. You have got two different systems in the eye. You have anterior segment, you have posterior segment. Two different fluids are also there. We have aqueous humor and you have vitreous humor, and you have a blood ocular barrier. Now what is happening, you have some communication of the eye with the blood. So this is very important, that it should be impermeable at places, it should be semi-permeable, because you cannot allow any kind of particle and every kind of particle entering into the eye. So those things which are no colloidal molecules, so those colloidal molecules should actually not be passing into the cavity of the eye. Fluorescein dye injected in the bloodstream. Now this is very important. When we read about the FFA angiography, there also we do read this, that when this dye is injected into the bloodstream, it is then bounding to the albumin, that is your protein, and makes a large complex. Right. Now the blood retinal barrier, by preventing the leakage of this dye in the physiological state, results in a clear outline of the retinal vessels of all the calibers. So this is very important fact. This is actually the principle. What is the working principle of the angiography? Why you are able to see the retinal vessels there? Because when you are injecting this dye is combining with the albumin, it is forming a larger complex. The complex is not able to go out, it is retaining, okay, and it has the property, this dye is having the property of autofluorescence. So when this dye is retaining inside the vessels, you are able to see whole of the vasculature, right? You are also able to see a clear outline of the retinal vessels of all the calibers, right? So this is very important. Now coming to the next one, if you look at the choroidal circulation, in the choroidal circulation, this fluorescein is passing freely across the vessels. Now when you come to the choroidal circulation, then it is passing freely across the vessels, and it is also going to the extravascular spaces. There is, however, a physiological barrier to the passage of dye from the choroidal spaces across the Bruch's membrane and the intact retinal pigment epithelium into the subretinal space. Now, you know, some dyes are showing better choroidal circulation and some dyes are better showing the retinal vasculature. You know that for the retinal vasculature, we have got the fluorescein, right? And for the choroidal vascularization, for the choroid, better is your ICG, because you know they when it is combining with this indocyanine green dye, it is forming larger complexes, so it is not able to come out even the choroidal circulation. See, when we do the angiography, otherwise we have got a separate video also, but because we are talking about the circulation here, you know that the most vascular part of the eyeball is the choriocapillaries. So obviously when you inject the dye, it is first going into the choriocapillaries and then it has to go into the retina. So this means that if any dye is going and it is combining in the choriocapillaries with a very large amount of albumin, if the binding is much more, then what is happening? A very large molecule is formed, and these large molecules are not able to go out. So this will highlight the choroidal circulation. While if you look at the fluorescein angiography, then a smaller molecules are formed, so they are able to come out of the choroid, but they are not able to come out the retina. So they are highlighting and delineating the retinal vessels. So I hope this is very clear to you. Now, the peculiar impermeability of the retinal capillaries and the Bruch's membrane, that is your pigment epithelial barrier, while necessary from the optical point of view, prevents the ready passage of these large size molecules of any kind into the eye. So this is what I have told you about the ICGA, that because of very large molecules which are formed by the indocyanine green dye into the choroidal circulation, so that is why they are not able to come out. Okay. Antibiotics. Now we will talk about the antibiotics. Antibiotics, when administered systemically, whenever we are giving the systemic antibiotics, are often of little value in the ocular therapeutics. That is why whenever we have a problem, we actually prefer to give the local antibiotics, the intravitreal, subtenon, subconjunctival, because systemic antibiotics have a very little role. Substances which are having a high lipoid solubility, however, which easily penetrate the living cells, traverse this barrier much more readily, such as sulfonamides and chloramphenicol. Now this is again very important, and I think question came in your AIIMS June 2020. Now it was not an exact question, but yes, it was a very similar kind of a question, and they had asked about some kind of solubility about the antibiotics. They are saying that those antibiotics which are having a high lipoid solubility, okay, so because of this solubility, they are easily penetrating inside the living cells. When they are going inside the living cells, they can traverse the barrier, and therefore they become effective. And the example of this will be your sulfonamides and chloramphenicol. Now, though we are not using like sulfonamides and chloramphenicol much now, but this proves that why we were using it from the earlier times, why it was that much effective. If the permeability of the capillaries is increased, large molecules will be able to pass through their walls. So if somehow due to any reason the permeability is increased, then what will happen? Even the larger molecules will be passing through their walls, so that a turbid fluid, now a turbid fluid which is rich in the protein is formed, leading to the plasmoid aqueous in the anterior chamber or the exudates in the retina or the choroidal effusion. Now again, this is very important. They are telling you about the aqueous flare. We have the aqueous flare which is taking place. Do you remember aqueous flare? This is your earliest sign of the acute anterior uveitis. Earliest sign of acute anterior uveitis, what was happening? We were having the flare, the turbidity, protein component in the anterior chamber. Now let us see why. Because in the uveitis we have inflammation, and due to the inflammation, the permeability of the capillaries is increased, so now larger particles can also go. So those things which are rich in proteins, okay, that fluid becomes rich in proteins, because now the protein particles are also able to hold inside the anterior chamber. They are forming the plasmoid aqueous in the anterior chamber, or they are leading to the formation of the exudates in the retina or the choroidal effusion also. So this is actually helping us to understand the things which we are actually seeing at so many places. We used to learn that there is aqueous flare, so they are actually emphasizing that physiology of the eye. This increase in permeability may be brought about by the vasodilator drugs in inflammatory conditions such as iridocyclitis, choroiditis, or if the capillary walls are mechanically stretched by sudden lowering the intraocular pressure and removing their external support. What they are trying to say, that you have seen that uveitis can produce this condition. We have got iridocyclitis, or we have choroiditis. What kind of drugs can also produce a similar condition? It is the vasodilator drugs. So nowadays, integrated questions are coming, and moreover, I told you that the ocular side effects of the systemic drugs are really very important. I have even recorded a separate video for that. So even the vasodilator drugs, so this can be asked as a question also, that which of the following drugs can simulate this condition. So it is the vasodilator drugs. This occurs when the globe is suddenly opened as by the paracentesis, or when the intraocular pressure is lowered by the vigorous massage of the globe. Okay, this can also happen when you are doing vigorous massage. So that can also lead to the similar condition, because that is also doing the vasodilatation. Vasodilatation will increase the capillary permeability, or when you are opening the globe for the aspiration, there also it can be present. Now we come to the nature and formation of the intraocular fluid. So we always read about the intraocular pressure. Let's read about the intraocular fluid also. Normal aqueous is transparent, colorless, low refractive index. How much was the refractive index? 1.33. And a very important thing, it is formed continuously from the plasma by the ciliary epithelial cells. So every word you know is important here. Okay, we do write these things in our notes. Gap junctions. We have got a gap junctions. These are present between the non-pigmented and the pigmented ciliary epithelial cells. Now, if you remember, this question was put up by some of the students also in the group, that do we have both kind of cells in the ciliary body? Yes, we have pigmented and non-pigmented, and that is why I actually emphasize that the aqueous humor is formed by the non-pigmented cells. So you have got the non-pigmented also, you have got pigmented also, and we have got gap junctions there, and these gap junctions allow free communication between these cells. Right, while we also have the tight junctions. So tight junctions are actually present between the non-pigmented epithelial cells. So those tight junctions which are present in the non-pigmented epithelial cells, they will form the blood aqueous barrier. So another barrier that is important here is the blood aqueous barrier, that is formed by the tight junctions between the non-pigmented epithelial cells. Again, an important thing. Formation of the aqueous humor, will be seeing the diagram also. It is known to have a number of mechanisms. We have ultrafiltration, diffusion and secretion. So I always tell you this, that all except MCQ can come on this, and what is most important, that is your secretion. The secretory process is actually powered by the metabolic activity of the cells, and probably accounts for 95% of the total quantity of aqueous humor. So I think now nothing to say more than this, that it is the most important, because 95% of the aqueous humor is formed by the secretion. Now, though the entire mechanism is not understood, but it is known that a water fluid rich in sodium and containing small quantities of ascorbic acid are secreted into the posterior chamber. So two things we already know is the sodium and the ascorbic acid. So here they have got a good diagram they have shown, where they have tried to show how the different ions and are floating here and there, and this is you know, aqueous humor is formed by diffusion. We have got diffusion, we have got ultrafiltration and secretions, and we also know that the most important is the secretion, and its composition is very similar to the plasma, and it is formed by which epithelium? Non-pigmented epithelium. Having this varied origin. Now, because aqueous humor is formed by three different mechanisms, therefore it consists of a dilute solution of all the diffusible constituents of the plasma. Also, we have got some substances which are specifically secreted too. Since the entry into the eye across the blood aqueous barrier is difficult and exit through the drainage is easy. Now, what they are saying, the entry into the eye through this barrier is difficult, but if you talk about the exit is easy there. Many of the constituents of the aqueous humor are in deficit in comparison with the blood. Except for those constituents which are actively secreted into the aqueous humor, we have many things which are deficient in the aqueous humor if you compare it with the blood or the plasma, because you know, entry is difficult and exit is easy from there. There is, however, three things which are important. We have excess of lactic acid in the aqueous compared with the blood due to the formation of this substance as an end product of the metabolism of the lens. So they have given only one thing, that this is actually in excess in the aqueous humor, but actually we have got three things which are in excess, and that I always tell you in the classes also. We have got the pyruvate, then we have got the ascorbate, and then the third is your lactate, and the third is actually lactate, so you can remember by the mnemonic PAL. So these three things are in excess in your aqueous humor. We have pyruvate, we have got ascorbate, and we have got the lactate. So this was about the physiology of the eye in short, which was dealing with the intraocular fluids, the barriers, the intraocular pressure, how the aqueous humor is formed, and what is the composition. So this is all for this session. Next time we'll be continuing, and we'll be finishing this chapter. So chapter number 2 will be having only 2 parts. It's a small one, but it is very important. See you in the next part regarding the circulation of the aqueous humor. Thank you and happy ophthalmology.